Viewer CCD brought up a question, so I figured I'd make a video and explain it. And also, since it's kind of related, kind of roll in a video I was making anyway. Now he asked why sort by head stamp, and that reason is thicknesses. Like possible differences in brass alloy, lengths. There's lots of little variables, like Federal, for instance. They have, it's actually kind of a separation. There's their lighter range and their heavier range of, the weight, and like nothing in between. But they are the hardest to derim. They take a fair amount more effort. You're going along with Remington CCIs and stuff, and you hit a Federal, you know it. It's just really evident. Now it could be, thicker, especially on the heavy range. They could have more zinc in their brass. That would make it harder. I have run into some that you can see the length difference in your hand. It's like 8 3/16 of an inch longer than most, but they all vary in length. So if you keep a like with a like, you minimize those variables, and issues you're forming things, the pressures and everything are going to be more similar between them instead of running into something that's very different. Like when I first started out forming rebated boat tails, the Remingtons were splitting at the base. They'd just rip open. The Federals, not so much. CCIs, somewhere in between. CCI and Remington weights are very similar. So, yeah. Excuse me. So, there's lots of little variations. If you minimize that, you minimize problems later. So here, this is core sizing. One thing that just in the last few days dawned on me, like really for this funnel plate. Like I use some plywood. It's some decent plywood. It's got thick layers, but you can see what happened occasionally. In between would break out. It still works, but yeah, it's not as beautiful and ideal as I'd like. Down on me, if I had used a 3/4 inch plank instead of plywood, if I had that and thought of it, that probably wouldn't have happened. It probably would have come out a lot nicer, and could have kept things as maybe even closer. So that is plenty good. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind for anyone thinking of making one out of wood. Get some planks, even if they're narrow, glue and clamp them together, sand them, make as big a piece as you need. Most of the shakers you get out there aren't very many, but they tend to be 100 holes. That one's 315. That's just what it turned out to be. You can make it any size you want. You can make it 1,000 if you wanted, but getting big and unwieldy. So, yeah, 3/4 inch plank would probably be the best. If you can work in plastic, it's even better. All right, now on to video I was making before. Core sizing. Why do I trim them? And weigh them out and all that. Basically it boils down to weight control. You squeeze them out, and you get that foil happening. Sometimes it's extreme, and sometimes, oh, come on. Sometimes there's none at all. So that's, weight variation. And so I like to trim that off and, keep it as consistent as I can. I'm finding that the less you squeeze off, the more consistent they actually are. So that, you really only want to try to squeeze off 5 grains or so. That's making sense now. But the other thing is, if you don't trim that off, like I shake them up in a Dawn solution to remove this lanolin-based lube, swage lube, and this stuff will either peen over or it will rip off. And we know how lead likes to stick to lead, so if it peels off of one, it could stick to another, especially if it's being hammered around while cleaning. It could really bond and cause a really big weight variation. Also, bag them up, handling, the same thing could happen. So if you trim that off, it minimizes chances of any of that happening. Now, even once trimming, there's going to be some weight variation, but it's going to be much less. Half a dozen different weights versus who knows, And if a piece rips off and bonds to another, it could fall off that later. Now you got it really in the wrong bag. Just minimize all that. Now, once you weigh it up, bag it out, do the same with your brass. I don't have matching. I just grabbed a selection just to pull out. But, you just grab up the two that weigh out to what's your target weight, throw them in the shaker and be done with it. And they're only going to vary a few few tenths of a grain. Versus, just not trimming, squeeze them together, weighing them out later, find out you got a wide range of bullet weights. One of this weight, a few of that, a whole bunch of these, and hodgepodge of stuff. Having, just a few very close weights that are close enough that's not really going to make a difference. So, in the end, you want them, you just grab them, shake them, squish them, and shoot them. It saves time at the end. Spend the time now or spend it later. I'd rather have, a small range of weights close together than who knows? You could run into some real oddballs if you don't, do the weight control. Now, one thing I did for my core sizing die, I added one of these Wooden Gunworks click adjustable rings. Now, it's not the panacea, but it helps. Reason being, I found I used to use the Lee lock ring. What I found was a corner to corner, a sixth of a turn was about a grain. Pretty much was a grain difference. So it's like, well, you turn it, you don't really know exactly. You're guesstimating. So I thought, well, every click is a thousandth of an inch. Problem is, there's 50 clicks in a revolution instead of 60. You got to have room for the detent, so it eats that up. So instead of each click being a grain, or a tenth of a grain, it's 0.12 is what, the math says. Reality, yeah. A lot of factors there. Once you trim it, how well you trim it. I just basically enough to tear that flashing off. I use a dull razor blade, so I'm not slicing off more than I want, but it doesn't, make it perfect. It just takes off the thin stuff. And so, it's not exact, but it doesn't move. I got unscrewed or whatever, it's going to stay there. Click up or down. Sometimes I hit voids where I'm either, too heavy or too light for what I'm wanting, but in batches, you're going to end up with a range anyway. And you go click up, and you're going to get a range that some of them will overlap, and click down, same idea. So it all just branches out. I find it's better to be a little heavy than light because you can always trim off a little bit, trim a tenth or two, get what you want. If you run out of something lighter, but you got something heavy, maybe something that doesn't actually have a match in brass jackets, it happens. Whereas if you're too light, you've got to add to it, which you can do with shavings from trimming them. But now you are individually tuning them, and that's a pain. It takes longer. Where trimming them, you can do it in a batch. Trim them up, weigh them up, and get a mess of them, and then do just like you would do. So, hopefully that kind of covers both of those in one video instead of two, which there's pros and cons to that. I could have got 2 videos out of it. What was I thinking? Yeah, they're kind of related, so it's all good. All right. Oh, hopefully that clarifies some things in my rambling way. All right. Well, I'll leave you that, and have a good one. God bless. See you.